Today I am really pleased and honored to introduce Keya Chatterjee, who is the Executive Director of the U.S. Climate Action Network, and she's also the author of a book, The Zero Footprint Baby: How to Save the Planet While Raising a Healthy Baby. Her work has focused on building an inclusive movement in support of climate action. Keya's commentary on climate change policy and sustainability issues have been quoted in dozens of media outlets, including USA Today, the New York Times, Fox News, the Associated Press, Washington Post, and all the other fake news that we know about. Before joining USCAN, Keya served as a Senior Director for Renewable Energy and Footprint Outreach at the World Wildlife Fund, where she worked for 8 years, and was also a climate change specialist at USAID. And has, oh man, you've been so many places, worked at NASA headquarters for 4 years, communicating research results on climate change. Keya was a Peace Corps volunteer in Morocco from 1998 to 2000, and currently serves on the board of the Washington Area Bicycling Association. She got her master's degree in environmental science and bachelor's in environmental science and Spanish from the University of Virginia. And Elders Climate Action is very, very proud to be one of the many members of the U.S. Climate Action Network, and we've participated in their annual events and try and participate as much as possible as we can. And she's going to tell you a little more about U.S. Climate Action Network and how elders could be involved. If you would like to go to the top corner of your screen and hit speaker view, you will then see Keya full screen. Having a little trouble unmuting you.
I think I'm unmuted because I've got my audio on the phone. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Climate change is an issue that has both changed my career and changed my life in many ways. I started working on climate change, excuse me, on a really discrete day in 2002 when I was working at NASA, and we got Arctic sea ice data that looked unusual because there was so much ice missing, and we saw that, and this happens actually quite frequently in the history of NASA, that there's data and it seems wrong, and then it turns out it's right. The most famous story of this was the ozone hole. This one was just a personal story. I was standing there with my colleague, Walid Abdullati, who ran at the time the Cryospheric Sciences program. So he studied ice. We got the sea ice data, and I was just stunned, and he was stunned, and we sent it back to Goddard Space Flight Center, and it was right. And it now seems kind of ridiculous that we were shocked in 2002, because of course since then we lost so much Arctic sea ice in 2007, again in 2012, and every year after that has brought us pretty stunning losses. So I came into this work really on that day. I went to my boss, Jack Kay, who was a flexible and great boss. I was very lucky. And 48 hours later, I had a new job, and I was supposed to be communicating climate change and climate science using NASA studies. And I really thought at the time that this would be a relatively simple job. So I thought, I'd go in, I would say, I'm here from NASA, we have a problem, there's some very simple solutions. We don't really have a technology hurdle, and here we go. And of course, it did not work that way. And I started to research why it wasn't working. And I came upon something called the knowledge deficit model, which the knowledge deficit model is this idea that there's a knowledge deficit. So somebody doesn't know anything, they have a knowledge deficit. If you fill that deficit, so if you fill the hole, then you solve the problem and people change their behavior. Well, it turns out there are thousands and thousands and thousands of studies on the knowledge deficit model, and it turns out it's just not true. People don't behave because of information. They don't behave because of knowledge. It doesn't change people's behavior to know things. And so I was really beginning to feel like a Cassandra at this point. It's a Greek mythological figure who the curse was that she could foresee the future, but that no one would believe her. So here I was working at NASA, feeling like a Cassandra along with all the other people in the science community whose research we were trying to portray. And I realized that I needed to do something a little bit different. And I probably needed to do something a little bit more on the scale of what my grandparents were involved in the Indian independence movement than really anything that we necessarily have seen in the US in terms of the type of activism that was needed to overcome what was really going on. There's actually pretty good agreement, as you guys probably have found in your own conversations, that we do have a moral obligation to do something. You start to lose people a little bit when you try to explain to them that, like, we also have solutions, both technology-wise and policy-wise, but that is still a reality, and you can convince people of that usually. But the reason we haven't moved and done anything as a society since I was born in 1977, so my entire life, ExxonMobil has known the exact scale and depth of the climate crisis and chosen to ignore it. So why haven't we done anything in 42 years if it's so simple, if we have solutions, if there's this enormous moral obligation, if the consequences are us not having access to food and water? We haven't done anything because the industry that wants to stop us is a very powerful industry. And so it's the oil and gas industry, the petroleum industry, the coal industry, but it's also, big agriculture industry. It's, and they're aligned with powerful industries as well, like the arms industry. And so we have an incredible hurdle to get beyond, to get to where we need to be. And we need people to do that. So we're very lucky to have all of you here and part of our community. Thank you very, very much for being part of our community and for everything you do to participate, but also everything you do to grow your community and reach out to your friends and neighbors. I really do believe it's the most important thing that we can do is grow. There's some research from a social scientist named Keya Chatterjee, who has shown across countries, across different types of governments, that over and over again, you get very, very deep and large scale change if you can get to 3.5% of the population really engaged in a sustained way in activism. So 3.5% of the US population is 11 million people. I'm on what's equivalent to the board, the mobilization support team for the People's Climate Movement, and so we call those kind of stress tests. And that's how we know how well we're doing, how many people we can turn out. And what we found in New York and DC, even on September 8th, is that we tend to be able to turn out about 1 million people. Well, that's a little bit shy of 11 million people. And so we do need to grow. It's not an unthinkable amount that we need to grow, but we need to grow quite a bit. We can also join forces with colleagues and others who are able to get to those numbers and build in that way, but we've got a long ways to go. And that is a part of why we all come together across organizations, because no one organization can do this work, no one sector can do this work. So US Climate Action Network is a network of 170 plus organizations. So these are faith organizations, environmental organizations, racial justice groups, immigration justice groups, economic justice groups, labor unions. It's a big, big mix of organizations and individuals and organizations. We come together to create change at the scale that we need it. So I am going to, let's see if I can quickly do this without slowing myself down too much. I think I can. I'm going to share my screen really quickly and just run through some slides. Jerry, can you see my screen?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, super. So U.S. Climate Action Network is, we are about creating generational and societal change. Our mission is to create trust and alignments for just and equitable climate action. And we fundamentally believe that building trust between our members is a core part of creating that generational and societal change that we know that we need to get. Our vision is to exceed the goals that were put forward in the Paris Climate Agreement. It's kind of a wonky vision. It's a little longer than that, to have a movement that's powerful and inclusive and trusting enough to exceed the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement. It's a little bit of a wonky vision, mostly because it's meant for our members who are already climate activists, like all of you, who get to hear about the Paris Climate Agreement and things like that all the time. So we have two members of every organization that we call our voting participants. So for you guys, it's Jerry and Shirley. And we invite our voting participants once a year to come together and vote. So what you see here is a picture of our voting participants voting. And this year in June, we came together in Spokane, Washington. Next year, we're going to come together in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we vote on what our work plan is for the next 12 months across all of these organizations. What are the things where there's a lot of energy and people want to work on things together? And so we had 4 items that were voted on, and we have one that's consistently there. So the first one is global climate advocacy. We did not vote on that. We keep that as a permanent action team because that is how U.S. Climate Action Network started. U.S. Climate Action Network started in 1989. Just after, in 1988, Jim Hansen first testified to Congress. The UN climate talks were getting set up around sustainable development and got set up around the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. In 1989, all those processes started, and that's when U.S. Climate Action Network was founded, so that groups had a way to come together and influence all of these processes. Since there seemed to be, at the time, to be honest, there seemed to be like a consensus that this was a problem and we were gonna solve it. And we were like, at the time, we were gonna do it in a few years. I don't think anyone imagined that we would get to be 30 years old as an organization. And it's pretty sad that we were. But I think we've learned some things. And part of what we've learned is, as we grow in organizations, it's really, really important for us to keep the community together and trusting each other, and to reduce the amount of infighting we have, and also to realize that we have to build power as we go. But we keep that global climate advocacy group always, because we also are the U.S. node of a large international network. So U.S. Can International, and Can Europe were all formed on the same day. There's now 20 nodes all around the world. That some of them are, there's Can Canada, there's Can France, there's also Can South Africa, and Can Southern Africa, and Can West Africa, and Can East Africa, and Can South Asia. I'm not going to name them all, but you get the idea. There are climate action networks. There are networks of people who are working across organizations everywhere in the world to advance action on climate change. And our group, US Can, is the 170 to 180 groups here in the US who want to work together with other organizations on their work on climate change. The second one listed here, Equitable and Ambitious Climate Vision, is a new one. And thank you, Steve, for participating in that group. It's been great to have you. We are doing what I think is a pretty ambitious task, which is moving forward to try and put forward a platform across all these organizations, figure out where we're aligned, and put together a platform that can be used for organizing and/or for candidates, and eventually, hopefully, also get to some policy agreements across our network. We have a group that's called Building Power from the Grassroots Up. We follow the Hermes principles within US Can. I won't go through all of them, but 2 core principles are really honoring grassroots organizing and letting people speak for themselves. So when our group that works on Building Power from the Grassroots Up, it's really a peer learning group. It's people sharing what they're doing to try and grow their own organizations and grow their organizing, and learning from others, and having that space to sit and talk to other US CAN members that are trying to build power from the grassroots up, hear their experiences and learn from each other, because we do have a lot to learn from each other. The next one, Social and Economic Just Adaptation and Mitigation, is a group that, it's a long name, it's really focused on adaptation, but they wanted to make it clear that it's about socially and economically just adaptation, and then they said and mitigation, because so much of what we do when we're responding to disasters is about responding in a clean way. So it's not that we're just, we've got all our members in North and South Carolina, we're really focused on helping them right now. But we also want to recover in a way so that when they recover, they're not in a position where they're going to get a bunch of hog poop back in their water the next time it floods, and they're going to get a bunch of mercury and arsenic from coal ash back in their water next time it floods. So we also want to recover in clean ways, which is why that's also got the mitigation word in there. But that group is doing really incredible work on flood insurance reform, on responding to disasters, on how to shift the financial flows that are coming in after disaster. We're at a point in this country where a huge amount of the infrastructure investment that's happening is actually happening post-FEMA disaster relief money. And so if that investment is made in ways that lock in dirty energy, we're in big trouble if we want to keep having, food and water and shelter and all those things that a stable climate brings us. So that group's it's its second year, and it's really moved forward some principles for disaster response, and also is doing really good work together, and has really impacted the conversation, I would say, around flood insurance reform and some other issues. The Just Social and Economic Transition group, last year, it's also the second year of that group. Last year, that year came together and realized that so many US CAN members use the word just transition in different ways. And so the first thing, the thing that they did last year was they actually made a definition so that people had a common understanding of what each other were talking about when they used the term. And also just put down on paper where there just wasn't agreement. Like some US CAN members tend to talk about just transition as a very broad concept that includes not only communities that had been reliant on income from fossil fuels, but also communities that had been left out of the fossil fuel economy. So including returning citizens who were formerly incarcerated in the economy, including communities that just hadn't really been fully included in the economy before. There's a lot of depth and richness to that definition that they came up with. And I'm happy to share it. It's actually all of our documents, for once members join any of our action teams, you have access to our Google Drive, and all of the documents for all of these groups are in there and accessible for all of our member organizations, including that definition. Let's see. So I just wanted to give a little bit of insight into how we operate. We basically follow what we call our member engagement cycle in everything we do. So we give out grants, which I'll talk to you in a second, but with the action teams, basically what we do is we ask people to participate in it. That's the call to participate. We engage the willing, those are the folks who show up. And then we have a conversation with folks who show up about who's missing. Who are we and you as our members worried about not being there, and we recruit for diversity at that point within our membership, but also sometimes we recruit members. If our members are telling us like we need to have these new members, we can do that too. And then of course we want it to be a fun and rewarding experience. So we try to really help our members get stuff done. So it feels good to work together in such a large group and across such different and make people feel good. And then we go back to the beginning and we ask people to participate again. So we're constantly going through this cycle that we call the member engagement cycle as we do this work in our action teams. I mentioned a second ago that we do have what we call member empowerment grants. So our grant cycle just closed for this year's grants. We got 23 grants. We receive, sadly, many more grants than we can actually fund, but we give away grants to organizations, that smaller organizations, collaborative grants to do either some learning together, collaborative projects, alignment workshops. We also give grants to groups that are really doing frontline power building work. So frontline being, sometimes it's also called fence line, communities that are really immediately feeling the impacts of fossil fuels and of climate change. A lot of those groups within our membership are all volunteer groups, don't pull down salaries, and they're facing the worst impact. So as part of our strategic planning process, we actually felt like it would be important for trust building for those frontline and fence line communities to directly receive some grants in addition to doing the collaboration grants. So we do about half and half. We give away about $600,000 a year in grants that go to our members, in addition to other ways that we support our members participating. We do track what's going on within our members. So we look at like which members have voting participants, who's meeting all our which voting, how many of our voting participants are meeting all of our requirements, how many are meeting 2. You can see that about 3/4 of our members are meeting at least 2 of the requirements. So we're just so we're tracking this stuff. We are tracking how connected our members are to each other. It's really important to us to build trust. So you can see our baseline a couple years ago. On average, our voting participants had 6 strong relationships with other USCAN members. 2 years later, we were able to move that up to 9. So on average, each voting participant for USCAN now has 9 strong relationships. And so we're continuing to focus on moving that up because again, our theory of change is that knowing and trusting each other across organizations is going to make us so more efficient at winning, and that in fact we can't win without that because we'll just end up with infighting. So this is getting a little bit into network theory, but I wanted folks to have a little bit of an understanding about why a network, like why not build a coalition and just get a policy done. The difference between a network and a coalition is really that a network is a network of individuals trying to get things done. We are not forward facing with our brand. We generally, there are some exceptions to this because the international media know us really well, but generally speaking, we're not trying to get on the media. We try to get out of getting in the media. Like we're trying to put our members forward, not be forward ourselves. Some exceptions to that tend to be when our members ask us to be member facing, to be media facing. So for example, when there's discussions about NAFTA, there's some utility in having US, CAN Canada, and CAN Mexico together on a statement because of the nature of NAFTA crossing 3 jurisdictions. So things like that, sometimes our members vote for us to engage. Generally speaking, we're pretty behind the scenes. We're basically trying to get, in 1989, it was this, on the left here, it was a scattered cluster of individuals. We got to, we went through this stage where our members knew us as staff, but didn't really know each other, which is this hub and spoke. Then we got to this multi-hub where, our members in the faith community knew each other, geographically co-located people knew each other. So members in the Southeast knew each other and in the Midwest knew each other, but people didn't really, there wasn't a lot of crossing across hubs. And then when you get to an intentional change network, which is this thing on the right, is where it's really self-sustaining and people are working together and you're getting a lot of efficiency out of that kind of a network. And this is actually our network. So every purple dot is a USCAN voting participant. So you can see we really have an intentional change network. We're pretty well connected. There are obviously folks on the periphery and folks on the inside. And we're always making an effort to bring folks in because we really need the folks on the periphery. And we also need help from the folks who are very well connected to try and get some of the things done that we're trying to get done in our action teams because they've got some really strong relationships they can leverage to try and move through sticky problems when we hit them or when we hit disagreements. And some of the folks in the middle really can be helpful in that. And as you can imagine, a lot of the staff are in the middle, but lots of members are in the middle too. Like we really are a pretty well-connected network, and lots of our members are just as well connected, just as connected as staff are, right in the center of things, which is great. So our theory of change is this really kind of summarized in this triangle on the right. It is that we want to have this connection. It requires low commitment and low trust to be connected. It allows for an easy flow of information and relationships, but we also then want to build on that connection and align people and develop and spread a shared point of view. And that then requires higher commitment and trust. And obviously we want to produce, we want to exceed the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement. We want to change the basis of the US economy and the global economy in very short order, is what that means. And so we want to foster collective action and pretty big collective action. And so when we as staff think about like what are things that are big at scale, we think about like scalable models. We think about things that don't have strong opposition within our membership, where we're not working as cross purposes. We think about things that build our membership, so we're getting towards that $11 million. We think about things where we can actually connect the dots between the work and the vision of exceeding the Paris Agreement goals. We think about things that lead with equity as a core value, and we think about things that really have a respect for all the different roles that activists play and that our members play. So just to give you a sense of what I mean when I say that last piece, we've been working through with our members this framework that Bill Moyers was a nuclear activist in the 70s, and he came up with this not for the climate change community, but it does very much apply, this idea that you need different kinds of activists. And so he labeled these 4 kinds of activists, and they each have, they're all needed in order for a movement to succeed. Some of them are needed more at different times, some of them are needed less at different times, but the citizens basically are protecting against charges of extremism, as it says here. So for example, you know, the Pope talking about climate change, like really like conservative institutions like the military talking about climate change, that kind of work to secure that is really citizen work. That work can be really ineffective if the people doing it don't realize that the power holders and institutions are serving elite interests and may not actually be serving the interests of all the people. But you actually need it. You have to do that kind of work where you're anchoring it. Reformer work is really lobbying, like, you know, kind of traditional lawsuits, election work. Reformer work is working within the system we have, the electoral system we have, the economic system we have, to change things. It's a big part of what our members do. It's an important part of what our members do. If it's done badly, it can really promote minor reforms that are not at the scale of what we need for any, you know, or what any, you know, this is generally not, this is for all activists, but it can produce minor reforms. People can get co-opted. So there are things that can go wrong. Similarly, rebel actions have their good and bad sides. So they're really, they employ nonviolent direct action. They're very, very good at getting in the media. They're very good at putting a problem in the public spotlight when people have been ignoring it. But you know, if you're doing it wrong, you can end up self-identifying as being on the fringe. It can end with strong negative emotions. So there's all kinds of things that can go wrong, but it's needed. And change agent work is the last quadrant here, where, you know, this is the work that's really trying to change the system so that it is a government, it is a political and economic system that could actually bring about the change that's needed for the issue you're working at. So that's people really building grassroots power over time, mass-based grassroots organizing that is really trying to make a major shift in our economic and governance systems at the same time that we try and do our work. And so it's absolutely needed because it's focused at the scale of the problem, but if you do it wrong, it can feel very dogmatic, it can feel utopian, people can disengage from the movement. So what we did in our meeting in Spokane, you can see these little post-it notes, is we had our members actually map all the tactics they're using, because different individuals can employ tactics in all 4 of these quadrants in a given year or day even. But just map, you know, we had our members map out where work is going on in the organizations, and we have a nice long list of what everybody is working on in 2018, 2019, and 2020 from our membership. Another role that I play, and this just gives you some sense of that we as staff play, is we engage in something called the Green Group. It's a group of 35 of the largest organizations, and we're doing a lot of work on reform right now. So to give you a sense of how we work when we do that stuff, this is a poll from last fall. Our fall survey will go out again. We'll ask this question again. We asked our members, we're doing this work because you voted for us to do this work. What is it you want to get out of it? And then as we do that work, we prioritize what our members say they want. So our members want, you know, coordinate large national group efforts with grassroots groups, to coordinate at the CEO level among different kinds of groups from frontline communities, EJ, et cetera. And so so when we do that work, we're really focused in that way on what our members want us to do. And these are actually results from last year's fall survey. This year's fall survey is about to go out on October 1st. We've been doing some work to get the questions through our various committees and make sure people are happy about what we're asking and that we're getting information that's really going to advance the work of our action teams, but also help us perform better as a network. So this is a little bit complicated of a chart, but what we tried to summarize at the bottom here are the things where our members tell us we're doing a really good job. So we're doing a really good job of members having access to trusted information. We have a listserv called the Clean List. People share information and models and solutions. People really like that. They feel like they know how to share stuff and get stuff from members. Members feel like they get to know diverse colleagues, and we're doing a really good job at that. We feel like we could be doing a better job on what's green here. Our members want to participate in processes to implement shared strategies across organizations. That's a really high bar and a high trust thing to do, as I showed, the alignment and producing. And so we're still working on that. We're still figuring out how to build capacity in our network and in our staff to make sure we're doing a better job on that. And then it's really important for members to move together with leaders of color within the climate movement and to leverage resources for shared goals. We're continuing to grow our grants program. We are giving grants to leaders of color so that they can fully participate, recognizing that leaders of color are called upon constantly to speak on panels, to participate in events, because suddenly people realize they have no diversity. And so we have a disproportionate burden that is falling on the leaders of color within our network. And because we get from our members really clearly a desire to move together with leaders of color, we've done a lot of work to try and ensure that folks can participate and that our leaders of color can fully participate in our network. So this is a snapshot actually from last fall. The survey is about to go out again. We also have policy surveys that a policy question that's a part of this. Where we really try to get a sense of where we have alignment between our groups. Again, that work of figuring out where the alignment is and drafting the policies is really sitting in the Equitable and Ambitious Climate Vision Action Team, and we'll be advancing that with the results of that data there. So that was everything I was going to share, all about me, all about climate change, and all about our network. So thank you very much for having me. And I guess, do we have time for some questions?
We do have some time for questions. For everybody who's on video, if you have a question and you want to raise your hand, I will unmute you so you could ask a question. I have a question in the chat, which is also appropriate. Yes, can you get a copy of the slide deck after the meeting? You will get a copy of the entire recording after the meeting. So the slides will be within that. Any questions that anybody has? I do have a question, and that is, how many active members do you have on your teams? Are you kind of at capacity, or you have more space for additional people?
We are never at capacity. No. So we have. I mentioned we have 2 voting participants per organization, and then we allow up to 10 participants in action teams. So we have lots of room for if folks want to get engaged in action teams. Some of the action teams are very large. A lot of the work happens then in subcommittees that kind of peel off and go do the work and come back to the full action team. And so we don't have any kind of size limitation on the action teams. We do recognize that, all the research tells us that groups of like 4 to 8 get the most done. So we create groups of 4 to 8 within the action teams when we have a lot of people within the team, and that helps us move the work forward. And also, Steve, maybe it would be helpful for folks to just hear anything you wanted to share about your experience of being on an action team.
Sure. I actually have a couple of questions, but maybe Steve, do you want to talk about your involvement with the 4O action team? Let's see if I can unmute you.
Yeah. Keya, it's great to see you tonight, and I can't stay for too much longer because I have another call actually, but I'm finding this really rewarding, and it's really good to get connections with so many diverse and very powerful organizations. So as a small group, which ECA is, and we're trying to grow, of course, this is a great organization to be a part of, and I just hope we can get more people to participate in your various committees as this year goes on. I did want to ask one question though. We have a vote coming up that you're going to send out. Would you like to, would you talk on that for a second or two?
Do you mean the survey on the policy stuff?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yep, sure. So we do a fall survey and a spring survey. The fall survey asks about policy questions, and this is going to be really used by this Equitable and Ambitious Climate Vision team. And so we ask our members what your views are as the best as you can say, and I know it's a hard question to answer, so the language around it is like, do your best to guess what your organizational position would be on this. Because it's not, there's nothing locking us into this. We just need to take a temperature of our members. So we ask like around 100% renewable energy, around bike lanes, around electric transportation, around high-speed rail, around a price on carbon, around promoting vegetarianism, around, so we have a list of 30 things, and we're going to ask, what does your organization think about these things, so that we can come back and say like, oh, well, look, it's really clear where there's some agreement in these areas, but we have some work to do, or we just have to like set aside this for a little while and focus on the areas where we agree.
Thank you. That's great. I have a question from one of our participants who would like to know if a new organization is interested in joining the network, what should they do?
Mm-hmm. So we have, they can just go, basically they can go to our website and fill out the inquiry form. There's an application, the process, just so you guys know how we do it. The process is when a new member comes in, a team member, Ishmael in this case, who's based on Atlanta, calls them and interview. They get an application form. They fill out the application. Ishmael calls them and has a 30-minute conversation with them if he feels like it's a pretty good fit. And sometimes they're not good fits. Like sometimes it really ends up being like a for-profit company selling credits or, like something like that. But if he feels like it's a good fit, then it goes to staff. Staff then takes a look at it. And if staff puts all their perspectives in, and then it goes to our board has a preliminary vote on it, and then it goes to our membership. If our membership has any flags on it, it goes back again for a board vote. And so all of this is in place just because, we live in a world where we just need to be careful about making sure like we're sharing we want this to be a high trust network where people feel really comfortable sharing things that they consider to be sensitive materials. And we want to make sure that everyone feels confident and trusts all the new members as they come in. So it is definitely a process, but we try to make it efficient.
Great, thank you. I have one more question and then we'll get to you, Margot. A couple of people are asking if you would be willing to share your slide deck with us and our members.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have another question. Margot, go ahead, ask your question.
Well, my question is, because we're kind of in the stage of, I love that grid about the stages of development of a network. And in a way, we are a very scattered network across this country with big gaps between, but in local communities, because we're grassroots focused also, how is there a way through US CAN that our members somewhere might be able to find other groups, climate action groups, economic climate justice groups, that they could connect with and support in their work in their communities? And how would they find out? Is there a way to do that for us to get them connected to them through US CAN in some way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a directory of all of our members. Members can get a login to our website, and when you log into our website, there's all kinds of information in there. Once you log in, and members are eligible to log in, and yeah, you can search for members. You can search for where they are by location or by it's not that populated right now. We haven't really made it a priority to populate that, but you can actually go in also and edit your own information so that more information is there. And as people add information, it'll become more and more searchable. And we have a little bit more information about people also as well. And so we could, if there's a lot of member demand, add some fields to the directory. But the directory is there and ready to be used. And in fact, I should say, not ready to be used. It is used. It's used all the time. Like, it's a pretty well used directory and set of resources.
Great, because it would be great to get more connection in that network at the grassroots level.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are regional networks as well. So USCAN is US-wide, but we have a Southeast Climate and Energy Network. REAMP is the Midwestern Climate and Energy. So there are regional networks as well, which a lot of our members are active both in their regional network and in the national network.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, one of the things that, we recognize that as elders, we're not trying to recreate an organization that already exists doing the work that's already being done, but rather be able to support that and collaborate, because there's elders in every other of the organizations that exist. So we really want to create a movement of elders and demonstrate that the elders care and can take action on climate and have a very strong voice due to our numbers and our voting history, et cetera. So that's kind of our focus, is to much more collaborate with other existing organizations and not recreate. So that's why USCAN kind of gives us that opportunity to collaborate more deeply with other organizations. I have another question here in our chat. I hear staff mentioned a lot. Can you talk about how funds are used regarding staff expenses versus action items?
Yeah. So we have 2 teams in our staff, and I don't think Shirley is on, but Shirley's definitely met our whole staff in the last annual meeting. I think Leslie's met most of our staff, if not all of our staff. So we have 2 teams. One team run by Ife Kilimanjaro, which is what we call our network engagement team. So they run all of our action teams, do our most of our member facing work. A lot of their work is like planning and implementing the annual meeting, but also doing a lot of the work that our members ask us to do within the Green Group, within the Climate Action Campaign, just maintaining a good information flow between these areas where big groups are making decisions all the time on behalf of others and making sure we're doing there. We also have a systems team that keeps our listservs up and running, that keeps our grants program running, that keeps our member directory up to date, that tracks our metrics, and that's run by Carrie Clayton. So Ife and Carrie each have 2 people on their team. So we have a staff of 7. So Ife's team has Ishmael, who I mentioned, who's based out in Atlanta, and Marie Risalvato. And they split up the action teams and run them. I run one action team. And then Carrie's team, Jameer, is like 50% my executive assistant, and 50% he does the network update every week. He manages all the listservs, and then Sydney does communications and also runs our grant review program. And so we have a pretty small staff we have about a $2.4 million budget, because most of our money is going out to our members. And so we're mostly making sure that we have stipends, as I mentioned, so leaders of color can fully participate in the process. We have the grants that I talked about. Most of that's the bulk of our budget is going out to our members.
Great, thank you so much. I'm not sure there's any other questions for now, but I would really like to thank you for the work that you do. We're really honored to be able to participate. You know, as a very small organization that doesn't come from the roots of environmental action, that comes from being grandparents and elder activists. So our experiences are a little different, and it's good to be in an organization where we're welcomed, and we can participate on a kind of even playing field, where it's not, you know, where you're just the little guys with virtually no budget and no staff and very few members, but you know, we feel like that is going to help us grow. And you've really been you've created an organization that accepts that, and at the same time is working on the goals of climate action. And so thank you very much for being here and for doing that. And we're going to move on to our Candidates Pledge Climate Action project that I just want to mention to everybody. And you're welcome to stay or welcome to go and spend time with your family.
I'm going to pop off, but thank you guys so much, not only for having me today, but also for the amazing work and organizing that you're doing. You're filling a gap that was really here and felt in the community. And I know a lot of our youth organizers are just so grateful and glad to have this opportunity for intergenerational exchange. So thank you very, very much for all of the work that you're doing. Bye, everyone.
Bye, and thank you very much. And so before we leave tonight, I just want to re-mention to everybody our Candidates Pledge Climate Action Project that we're currently working on, and we'd hope that you'd all participate in. It is a project where it's our campaign leading up to the election. This is the most important election in our lifetime, I believe, and is going to determine the future, probably the future for our grandchildren. And so I think it's very important that we engage in any way we can. ECA's decided that we're going to do a Candidates Pledge Climate Action campaign where we're asking candidates from state, local, municipal, federal candidates, all, not, you know, across all parties, to sign a pledge that they'll take climate action when and if they're elected. And even if they're not elected, hopefully they'll take climate action. So this is a campaign we're working on, where we're happy to go over it with everybody and explain it a little further for those of you who would like to get more information on it. It's pretty easy. It's on our website. You can go to our website, you go to Get Engaged and Take Action, and or just go on our homepage and hit Candidates Pledge Climate Action, and all of the material is there. You can find out who your candidates are through a variety of ways, and also then what you can do is find candidates at their office, at their, wherever they are, at candidates forums, town hall meetings, etc., and ask that question. It's, or you could do it by email or snail mail, however you choose. We would like to have as many candidates as possible. And behind this is not just the signature on a pledge, but behind this is the message that there's 90 million elders in this country, and elders are not just sitting at home. Elders are concerned about climate change, and they're going to vote about climate change. So that's, our big purpose in doing this, in as much as getting the actual signatures and getting people to pledge. The pledge is pretty easy to comply with. It's not very egregious. It's very non-controversial. So it shouldn't be difficult for anybody to actually sign. So are there any questions? Anybody that's currently involved in it that has questions or comments on it? I know that Francis has been very involved. Let me, go ahead, Frances.
Yeah, I've approached candidates mostly by email and by Twitter and Facebook. And I think we've gotten a good response in contacting candidates mostly through email and Facebook and Twitter. And all those have been, I think, helpful with different people. But probably email has probably been the most helpful. Also, and a little bit of snail mail. Although it turned out much harder to get snail mail addresses for campaign offices than I expected. But generally, what I found is that even for people who really are pretty enthusiastic once you get their attention, it takes more than one contact usually to get their attention. But we've gotten 9 candidates who are going to be on our ballot here in Montgomery County, Maryland, to sign so far. And I've got a couple of others who had some interaction with that seemed positive who haven't signed yet that I'm hoping will sign.
Great. Thank you, Frances. Anybody else want to share some experiences or have any questions regarding the project, Leslie?
Yes. I too have not been using Twitter, but I've sent people messages on Facebook and emails and one of them, you know, it's not just getting signatures, it's getting climate change to be part of the election discussion. It's getting it out there so that other people are hearing that there's concern. And so that's a good reason to be raising it in public fora or in ways that we can get it out there. We're also publishing the names of those who have signed the pledge so that can be part of the dialogue too.
I think also having it on social media also lets people know that there is such a thing as Elvis Climate Action, and gives them a little bit of information about what we're doing, maybe raises a little bit of curiosity. So I think that can also be helpful.
Great. Yep, you're right. Hopefully we will, as we move into October, the time is drawing near. Candidates are much more concerned about being visible in the communities that they're running in. Although very interesting I'm in Florida, and in central Florida in Brevard County, which is a strong Republican stronghold, and they've been candidates forums, and the Republican candidates refuse to participate in any candidates forums. They're just no-shows. There was a candidates forum last week, and there was one person on the dais. That was it. Wow. Pretty sad. But we're going to work on that. If anybody has any further questions, we're going to set up another call in the next week or so to answer any questions or provide some additional support. Go through the website for the project. Catherine?
Yeah, that's pretty shocking for one thing, and for another thing, it in itself it speaks volumes about who the candidates are. But I wonder if there's some way to optimize your power on that, in publicizing it and getting it out that they are no shows, to, shaming them, getting notices in the local newspapers or other ways to shame these people who are not coming. This is your representative. Where are they? They don't come face to face. It seems like a really good publicity handle.
You are right. And in fact, last year there was an electronic billboard placed. It was before it wasn't before an election, it was right after the election. There was an electronic billboard placed on an interstate in Central Florida, and without calling out the name, it was, "Where is Senator Blank? He's missing." And it was an electronic billboard that was just running there. So, yeah.
There must be ways, avenues. I paint the signs myself. I don't know.
Margot.
Margot, unmute.
I can't.
Yes.
Okay, you're unmuted. Say
Okay,
again.
that didn't let me unmute. Can you hear me now?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I'm noticing that we have somebody from Texas and somebody from South Carolina on this call, and I'm really excited that you're here. And I hope that in your community, whether it's for local elections or state or federal elections, that you will be able to try to engage some of your candidates in your states in this pledge. And I want to share that today I decided I'm going to reach out to people who are running for city council in my little town. And I met today with someone who's an incumbent who's up for the election. And I didn't talk about the pledge with her. What I did was start to talk to her about what are the things she cares about in the community, and to get to know her better and to find places of commonality and tie it into climate change. And I'm going to hope to do that with all of the candidates, so that then I can say to them, will you sign this pledge? And I can ask them at the candidates forum some specific questions about climate change. So it's really, the pledge is a great incentive for starting to reach out and build relationships.
Climate change.
Thank you, Margot. You're right. Well, I hope everybody has enjoyed this evening's call. It was really Keya's an enlightening and energetic presenter, and she's done a lot over her course of her career, and she certainly has a lot of knowledge to share and a lot of enthusiasm. And I'm hoping that you'll all participate or be willing to at least pursue a little more the Candidates Pledge Climate Action campaign. And any way we can help you, if you don't remember my email address, just send an email to info@eldrisclimate.org, and we'll get back to you. I'll get back to you, or Leslie or Margot will get back to you immediately. So thank you all for being here tonight. Have a good evening, and I'll see you all next month at the next call. The next call will be the 4th Tuesday of October, and for that call you will be hearing from our latest round of climate reality leaders who have gone through the Climate Reality Leadership Training Program in Los Angeles very recently. And in fact, Todd was a part of that, and Art Mitchell, who was here earlier, I don't see him now, was also a part of that, as well as Jen Chandler, who is working hard on climate reality. So hopefully we'll see you all again next month. And have a good night, everybody. Thank you.